Morris, returning to old franchises with another Dumb and Dumber installment, and blurring the line between performance and personal breakdown in the Showtime series Kidding. He's dipped into political satire on Saturday Night Live and brought his signature unpredictability to Dr. Robotnik in the Sonic the Hedgehog films. At one point, he spoke candidly about wanting to step away from acting altogether, sounding as though he closed that chapter for good, only to return to the Robotnik role again in 2024. Where Carrey's career has been marked by reinvention, his personal life has followed a more repetitive pattern, one of intense connection followed by sudden rupture. His marriage to Melissa Womer ended in 1993 after 6 years together and a child, at what Womer has described as a moment that came without warning. She said that everything seemed stable until Carrey left the film Ace Ventura, a turning point she saw as the moment he began stepping into a new identity, one built around fame rather than the life they'd shared. He met Lauren Holly, his Dumb and Dumber co-star, around that same period, which fueled public speculation about the timeline, something Holly has denied, saying her relationship with Carrey didn't begin until his marriage was effectively over. Regardless, Carrey and Holly married in 1996 and had filed for divorce by mid-1997. Holly later attributed much of the strain to relentless media intrusion, paparazzi going so far as digging through their trash, which left little room for the relationship to breathe. A relationship with Renee Zellweger followed in 1999, sparked during their work together on Me, Myself and Irene. By most accounts, it was calmer and more grounded than his previous relationships, though it too ended by December 2000, with both sides citing incompatible priorities. In 2005, he began a highly public 5-year relationship with Jenny McCarthy, which included a close bond with her son, Evan, and a shared public platform. When it ended in 2010, those close to the couple pointed to fundamental differences in how each of them related to public attention. The most painful chapter came in 2015, when his on- and off-partner Catriona White died. Carrey described her publicly as gentle and deeply sensitive, someone whose loss left a mark that was difficult to process, a difficulty compounded when White's estranged husband and mother filed a wrongful death lawsuit in 2016 accusing Carrey of contributing to her death by providing her with drugs despite knowing about her struggles. Carrey rejected the claims outright, and the case was dismissed in 2018. Away from film sets, Carrey has increasingly turned toward painting, describing it as something close to therapy, a way of expressing what performance couldn't quite capture. That work eventually took on a political edge, with pointed portraits of figures like Mark Zuckerberg and Donald Trump. His depiction of Sarah Huckabee Sanders drew particularly strong reactions, splitting opinion between those who saw it as bold satire and those who felt it crossed a line. That same willingness to sit in discomfort has shown up elsewhere. He briefly signed on for Kick-Ass 2 with no apparent hesitation about his violent tone during filming, but after the Sandy Hook school shooting, he publicly withdrew his support for the film ahead of its release, saying he could no longer stand behind that level of violence, a decision that didn't sit well with everyone involved in the project. During his relationship with Jenny McCarthy, he also became closely associated with vaccine skepticism, publicly questioning vaccine safety and promoting the widely discredited link between vaccines and autism, a stance that drew heavy criticism from the scientific and medical communities. Carrey's most talked about immersion, though, came through his portrayal of Andy Kaufman in Man on the Moon. He didn't simply play the role. By most accounts, he stayed in character continuously, on set and off, to the point that even the crew began addressing him as Andy rather than Jim. Filmmaker Chris Smith, who documented the production, later said that being around Carrey during that period didn't clarify who he was. It did the opposite, revealing how little anyone truly understood about the person underneath the performance. Dave Chappelle experienced that firsthand. Introduced to Carrey on the Man on the Moon set through Norm Macdonald, Chapelle expected to meet the actor he admired. Instead, he spent an entire afternoon talking to Andy Kaufman, with the entire crew playing along as though the transformation were complete. Chapelle has since reflected on the encounter with some humor, but has also been candid that it was disorienting. He could plainly see he was talking to Jim Carrey, yet the illusion around him insisted otherwise. Carrey himself later acknowledged how far he'd taken the role, describing periods where he felt almost entirely displaced from his own identity. That same unpredictability. Long before he became one of the most recognizable faces in film, James Eugene Carrey was a working-class kid from Newmarket, Ontario. His mother, Kathleen, stayed home while his father, Percy, drifted between music and accounting, trying to keep the family afloat. Raised Catholic with 3 older siblings and a mix of Irish, Scottish, and French-Canadian ancestry, Carrey's upbringing looked ordinary on the surface, except for one thing. Even as a young boy, he was fascinated by his own face. At 8, he'd stand in front of a mirror stretching his features into strange shapes, testing the line between expression and comedy. By 10, his confidence had outpaced his experience. He wrote to Carol Burnett convinced he already deserved a spot on her show, and a form letter reply back was enough to make the fantasy feel within reach. But while his imagination was expanding, his family's finances were collapsing. After relocating from Scarborough to Burlington in search of stability, the Carreys eventually lost their home altogether. For a stretch, the family lived out of a Volkswagen van, and teenage Jim and his brother spent months sleeping in a tent near Lake Ontario. When his father finally found work at a tire factory, it came with strings attached. The boys had to work grueling overnight shifts as janitors and security guards to help earn the family's housing. It was a bleak, repetitive existence, and by 16, Carrey had dropped out of school entirely, splitting his time between factory labor and small comedy gigs in downtown Toronto. He later said that if his life had gone only slightly differently, he could easily have ended up working in a steel mill in Hamilton rather than chasing a stage. Carrey's first real shot at stand-up came in 1977 at Yuck Yucks, a rough, unglamorous club that met one night a week in the basement of a Toronto community center. He was 15, dressed in a leisure suit his mother had picked out, armed with safe, old-fashioned impressions that had no chance against a crowd looking for edgier material. The set collapsed, and so did his confidence. Not in a way that faded overnight, but in a way that lingered, making him question whether comedy was really his path. That doubt sat alongside genuine family hardship. For a while, stepping back from performing seemed more practical than pushing forward. But when the family situation stabilized enough to move to Jackson's Point, Carrey returned to the stage a changed performer. By 1979, he landed a paid $20 set in Scarborough, and the small payday felt like proof that something was finally clicking. He went back to the very Yuck Yuck stage that had humiliated him 2 years earlier, this time relocated to Yorkville, and turned it into the place where his real career started to take shape. Open mics became paid slots, and by 17 he was building a genuine local reputation. The bigger stages didn't come easily, though. A shot at Saturday Night Live for the 1980 to 81 season fell through. An attempt to open for the rock band Gatto and Barry ended with him being booed off stage, so badly that he skipped the second scheduled show. Yet just 2 weeks later, a glowing review in the Toronto Star, photo included, declared that a genuine star was emerging and demand for him spread across Canada almost overnight. From there, momentum built quickly. An appearance at the Improv in 1981, a television film role playing a struggling impressionist that mirrored his real life, and a career-changing opportunity when Rodney Dangerfield brought him on tour as an opening act, introducing him to American audiences for the first time. An audition for The Tonight Show in 1982 didn't lead anywhere immediately, but rather than give up, Carrey went back to refining his craft, eventually landing 2 sold-out shows at Toronto's Massey Hall that same year. When Carrey's Hollywood breakthrough finally arrived, it arrived fast. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber turned him into a global phenomenon almost instantly, and he kept the momentum going with Batman Forever, The Cable Guy, and Liar Liar. But rather than settle into a single comedic lane, Carrey pushed into more dramatic territory with The Truman Show and Man on the Moon, earning serious critical attention in the process. He balanced that range further with How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Bruce Almighty, before delivering one of the most acclaimed performances of his career in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a quieter, more internal role that marked a clear evolution in his work. That same year, he was inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame. In the years since, Carrey has continued shifting, voicing animated roles in Horton Hears a Who, taking on dark material in I Love You, Philip,